So, thanks everyone for coming, and if it's your first time, welcome to Koi. Indeed, Abbot Ieronymos has come from Springwood, so it's a long drive, but he's a very busy man, so we appreciate very much that he's here. And he's come to talk about monasticism. So he'll explain what that is, or have to explain what that is, by the better job of myself, but have some questions in mind you want to ask at the end. We're just going to have a conversation like always, and then we'll open it up to you those more questions. Yes, so thank you for coming down. I guess we will start by asking what is monasticism, really quickly, your definition.
Yes. Well, allow me first of all to thank His Grace Bishop Christodoulos of Magnesia and Father Athanasius and the newly ordained deacon Father Marius, who extended the invitation through you and all the members of the Koi Youth to be amongst you. And I also take this opportunity to wish Bishop Christodoulos, Father Athanasius, and Father Marius all the best in their new ministry at the great Parish of the Resurrection of our Lord, Kogarah. And as I was saying to Father Athanasius before, allow me also to acknowledge the good work and efforts of the predecessors, the newly ordained Bishop Kyriakos of Sozopolis and Father Demetrios, whom I'm sure they guided you at the very, very beginnings.
Yes, we weren't be here without them.
Yes, of establishing this beautiful, amazing group of young people. And I have to say that we hear a lot of good things about this group, this youth group. Everyone who's come and has become, as part of this, they're very excited and they want to come again and again and again, which is very nice. Yes. So, but also, I have to congratulate you for choosing this series of topics after we were able to open our churches after the extended lockdown, that they are based basically on how to find our purpose, which is the eternal question that we all had, I'm sure, at some point of our lives. And it's a question that sometimes is hard to answer and find what is this that we really are called to do by God in our lives so that we can find meaning and purpose. Monastic life. As I was saying before, it is very interesting how I'm asked to talk about monastic life, although I'm sure that there are a lot of other spiritual and holy people that they can talk about monastic life through their example. But it's nice how we have the opportunity tonight to talk about monastic life. Because for some people, as I was saying before to you, monastic life seems something which is separated from the church life. And unfortunately, even amongst the youth, monastic life is considered something which is away from the life in the world, as if only a few people are chosen to become monastics and they are just somewhere in a separated place, and all of the rest people, they are far away from them, and there is a gap between the two sides. Obviously, this is not the truth. From where can we start? But I suppose I will just tell you just a few things that Elder Ieronymos of Simonopitra says about monastic life. And he says, in my own words, do you think that monastic life is something that started from humans? When did monastic life start? He says, the archetype of the monastic life is the life of the angels, the angelic life. And we are talking now even before the world was created. This is what Elder Ieronymos says. This life of the angels, that the only thing that they were doing before the creation of the world and are still doing through the ages is to serve God and always to follow Him and minister Him. With the creation of the world, we could also say that monastic life started in paradise. Because Adam and Eve lived a life of purity before, obviously, their fall, a life which was a continuous communication with God, free of cares. And then, because they lost focus, which is something that monastics shouldn't do, shouldn't lose focus, they found themselves away from God. But through the ages, as Elder Ieronymos says, God revealed to His people again the archetypes of the monastic life. For example, He said to Prophet Moses, "Go, climb up to the mountain and stay there. Stay there up until I am revealed to you." This is what monastics are trying to do. That's why a monastery can be considered a world which is outside of the world and yet is inside the world. There are all these spiritual life and the church life and the monastic life is full of paradox. But they do make sense if you think about it. Monastic life also was revealed through Prophet Isaiah. Apparently there is a prophecy from Prophet Isaiah, something that I also was not aware. See how rich the scriptures are, and especially the Old Testament. And Prophet Isaiah talks about the future, about these birds of heaven, that they symbolize monastics, that they are put there in a fortress as the lampstands, or as St. Paisios used to say, the radio operators. In the spiritual life, in the life of the church, there are no history gaps. Everything is connected.
Yeah. You mentioned before, Elder Ieronymos, that this was actually your elder, is it not a
No.
monastery?
Elder Ieronymos of Simonopitra of blessed memory was the abbot in the monastery of Simonopitra from 1973 up until 1995, when he became unwell, and up until 2000 that the new abbot, Elder Eliseos, was elected. So we could say that Elder Ieronymos of Simonopitra of blessed memory is our spiritual grandfather or forefather, because he was the spiritual father of Bishop Ieronymos, of whom we are spiritual children. Yes.
Yeah, that's very fun. The monastery of Simonopitra is on Aioros.
Yes. Yes, on Mount Athos, yes. It's one of the 20 monasteries, and it's very characteristic. It's a very characteristic monastery because it resembles multi-story buildings, and apparently some say that they are the two first multi-story buildings that they were ever built. The buildings of the monastery of Simonopitra.
Mount Athos is interesting because I don't know how many people know what Mount Athos was. Actually, the place you embrace, I think it's on the third leg of the Saloniki. So, on the third leg of the Saloniki.
Yes, yes.
And it's actually men only. It's and it's full of monasteries and monks, and
And it's,
yeah,
so,
it's very special.
and it's surprising how actually Mount Athos was always positioned, or actually my island was always positioned opposite Mount Athos. So I'm coming from a small island which name is Thasos, and this island is opposite Mount Athos. Yes.
If you don't mind me asking, what was your personal journey to monasticism? So I'm sure there's a lot of people who've maybe thought about taking that path, but they're not sure, where they find the answer, whether it's yes or no. Should I take this path, or should I get married? Maybe they're at a crossroads.
Yes.
I think maybe
Well,
your journey might help something.
on answering your questions, Brethren, just allow me also to finish with my thoughts that I was saying about the monastic life. No, that's okay. Don't worry. We can also have a nice debate. So, but there is a, yes, I just want to finish on this because actually I will connect this with your question. So, but through the history of the church, and especially the later years, because the monasticism as an establishment, we know that started around the years of Saint Constantine the Great, and right after the great persecutions stopped. So monasticism for people back then was a way to express their love and their dedication to God in a unique way. So for them, the life in the world was not enough. And once the persecutions stopped, which we know that a lot of martyrs, a lot of people gave their life to God, confessed their faith. Afterwards, there were a lot of people that life in the world was not enough for them. And that's why monastic life now is called the martyrdom of our conscience, which means that in the monastic life, we are asked, if we want to go close to God, to go against our will, our ideas, our past life, against all these attachments we have with the world. So, why I finished with this? Because even for myself, I think if I was to go back and ask myself, because I have done this many times since I made my decision to become a monastic, and since I became a monastic, and all these years, sometimes I go back and I ask myself, but what was the reason why you became a monastic? Not because I doubt it, but I want to remind myself. I always want to remind myself. So, I remember there was a moment while I was studying for my exams after the year 12 to enter into the university. And next to the books that I had to study for the exams, I always had the spiritual books, not many, because back then I didn't have many, but just a few books that my grandfather had because he was a chanter. And my grandfather was given as a gift by an Archimandrite who was the parish priest of the church he was chanting at, a book that was talking about the Ten Commandments. Yes. And I was just going through this book while I was studying for my end of year exams, because like after a while, whatever I was studying was not like touching my heart. It wasn't enough for me, basically. I was doing this because I had to go and study something. Yes. And while I was reading this book, one day I was on my own at home. My parents, they were at work. I just reached a point that he was describing the afterlife, what happens after we die, the kingdom of God, the glory of the righteous, all these things that they are prepared there from God for us. And whatever I read, it just blew my mind. Obviously, was I aware of all these things? Probably, yes, even from before. But we all have a certain moment in our lives that everything clicks in our mind. And God can talk to us through many things, like through a book, through a nice chanting hymn that we might listen to, even through like a small child that they might say something to us, or sometimes even through a tribulation or difficulty we are going through. Anyway, so I just read this and I said to myself, but if this is what God has prepared for us, and if we know and if we accept that life is too short, even if it is for 200 years, which no one has ever lived, like in the modern days for 200 years, then what's the purpose of this life? What is this that we have to do in order to acquire what God has prepared for us? And then I said to myself, obviously there is a different way. There is another way of what society is presenting to us. And since then, I've started exploring. I've started going to the church even more often. I've started becoming accustomed with the hymns, with whatever I could absorb so that I can understand the treasure of the church and of what was this that God has prepared for us. And obviously God regulated things in such a way that when I gave exams, afterwards I passed on to the theological school in Thessaloniki. And I said to myself, probably this was from God, because originally I wanted to put theology as my first preference. But as you can understand, there were objections by the people that they were around me, for obvious reasons. Yes. And then after I started studying theology, I've realized that what I was thinking of becoming when I was little, because people, they would ask me, what do you want to become when you grow older? And I would tell them, I want to become a priest monk. Yes, an Archimandrite. Yes, because I didn't know that actually you can actually become an unmarried priest or monk and stay in a monastery. I always thought into my mind that the only way that you can follow Christ and become a monk is if you are an unmarried priest in the world. But then once I realized that monasteries exist and you can become a monk, then I've realized that everything I was looking for, God has put it into a monastery. That's why the first time I remember I went and visited the monastery of Simonopetra for a few days on my first year of my studies. Everything seemed so surreal, like something that I was not used to, but at the same time I was used to. Something that it wasn't easy to wake up in the morning and go to the services, but every time I would do that, I would just, like pinch in myself and say, but is this real? Like, but does this life exist? Where was I all these years? What was I doing? It's an experience, obviously, that you cannot easily express in words, but it's something which is very strong, and I'm sure that we'll talk on this, but this is what it's necessary for someone to become a monk. or even to become a married person. There has to be inside you something so strong that nothing, good or bad, can change it, can shake it.
That feeling that you just mentioned has to be so strong. Would that be a main indicator for someone who wants to join a monastery, or is there things like we need to be aware of, possibly maybe like a delusion, maybe, or is it like you get the feeling like maybe you just starting to come to church and you feel like this is the only way to go, because we're talking before, like I used to think being a monastic was the only way to even become a saint in God's eyes. Like, is there maybe some questions someone should ask themselves before they become a monastic?
Yes. I have kept a few notes actually on how we can prepare ourselves for becoming a monastics. And I was saying to Father Paisios as we were coming here, obviously monasticism is not a topic that can be exhausted in just only in one talk. And I'm not saying this out of pride that I have too many things to tell you, or that I have understood 100% what monasticism is all about. But there are so many things we can talk about when we're talking about monasticism. So maybe a good topic for the future, just saying. It's not that we want to come back again. What I'm just saying is, just to talk about how we can prepare to become monastics. How can we cultivate our monastic calling? Because this is another huge topic that a lot of people, are going through. This, it's not an issue, but just a stage in their lives, a process, and they need some guidance, obviously, yes. But when we are talking about monasticism and whether monasticism is for us or not, obviously some people, they can translate this process or this question in finding our calling, whether we are called by God to become monastics or not. But allow me to read you, I'll just say only a few things that I have written down from Abbot Ieronymos, because it's amazing. And it blew my mind when I was reading that. So it says that first of all in our lives, we have to realize what is this that we have to do. And by doing this, we become useful in front of God. I don't know if you understand this, but so this is before even going to the process of whether we become monastics or not. This is actually standing in front of God and realizing what is our purpose. Then we'll go to whether we become monastics or not. And what is our purpose? Our purpose is, first of all, to be saved. And not only to be saved, but to become God's by grace, to become holy. So, in order for us to do this, I have to allow myself to become useful in front of God and in front of the others. This is how my life becomes meaningful, regardless of what I'm going to do in my life. And then, Elder Emiliano says, if I do this, if I put myself under God, under His direction, then he says, I can grab God. He uses, anthropomorphic ways. He says, I can grab God whenever I want. But what does this mean? That actually we can have God, we can have His grace available to us anytime we want. This can happen. This is our calling. This is our original calling. This is what the saints achieved. So, if we accept this, then we will realize that God may appear in our lives in many different ways, but regardless of what we are doing in our life or what we are not doing. Obviously, whatever we have to do, it has to be appropriate. Yeah? And so God may be there for us while we are working and are trying to feed our family, while we are trying to find the right person to meet and get married. God is always there for us while we are sitting on our knees and asking God to enlighten us which path to follow. God is always there for us regardless of the path that we are going to choose. And at the end, Elder Emiliano says, what is the answer on the question, which path should I follow? What is my calling from God? And he says, I am the calling of God. God is becoming my calling. I don't know if you understand this. It's like God is becoming my election. I choose to be close to God. And then God calls me to do what I choose to do. And God becomes my calling, and God becomes part of this process once I realize what is my calling. And then I become the place that God, through me, may be revealed. So, we have to set our priorities right from the beginning and understand that whether we become monastics or not, we have to be close to God. And we have to be apostles of God. Because some say monastic life is an apostolic life. But Elder Emiliano says that Christian life is an apostolic life. Every time. And we are outside in the world. We are amongst our family members. We are at the church. We are at the monastery. We are here today. We are called to become apostles. How? Through the way we think, the way we process information, the way we talk, the way we behave, the way we respect the person who is sitting next to you, right at this moment. How do you respond to the love of the person who is sitting next to you? And I have said many times, see, monastics and clergy are not afraid sometimes of using the word love. God is love. The main message of the gospel is love. But because nowadays this name and this word has become so much distorted, sometimes we are even afraid of using this word. Why? Because the only thing we have in our minds is something which is not genuine, real, pure, innocent. So, and we have to ask ourselves, if in our minds, when we hear the word love, come other things, we have to reassess ourselves, reevaluate ourselves, and go back to the beginnings.
Well, that was really nice. It's hard sometimes not to imagine like the depth of spiritual life a monastic can go to and experience. But you're also saying, as well as giving the $1,000,000, you're saying this can be experienced as a married person too. Is that right?
Of course. So the question is, obviously, which path we're going to choose. And you have to have all options open. But we have to ask ourselves, Is there a point there of sitting down and just asking ourselves which path we're going to choose when our life is not Christ-centered? Think about it. Like, how are we going to find our path if we haven't allowed Christ up until now to become part of our lives? And I'm not saying this in a judgmental way, because sometimes we all find ourselves, like at certain moments just thinking in a different way, or finding ourselves being far away from God, even monastics sometimes, in clergy. But I'm sure you understand what I mean. Yes.
Everyone knows there's a difference between being married and being monastic, but are there similarities maybe in the spiritual lives of both?
Yes, this is a very good question. Abbot Ieronymos says that Christian life is one. But there is a point for some of us that I'm sure, but most of us, we can relate onto this. There is a point where we find ourselves on the crossroads. Like as we grow older, like we study, like we're close to our family, but there is a certain moment that we are thinking, what is this that we are going to do next? Well, then, there are two paths on the crossroads. And one is the monastic life, and the other one is the married life. Or, as Elder Ieronymos says, the sacramental marriage, which is the married life, and the mystical marriage, which is the monastic life. See, both lives are a marriage. With the married life, obviously you marry your spouse, but in the monastic life, we follow Christ. We marry Christ and His church. And there are similarities. And that's why sometimes we say that when we talk about monastic virtues, I don't know, do you think that monastic virtues only apply to people that they want to become monastics? And what are these virtues that we are talking about? Monastic virtues. For example, obedience. It's something that most of the people talk when they come to the monastery. It's something that most of the people probably are afraid of. Even the people, that they're thinking of joining a monastery. And sometimes I say to people, and especially to the little children, regardless of your path, and if you want to become a monastic or a married person, you have to learn how to practice obedience. Why is that, I think? That because if you become married, still even if you become married, you think that there won't be times that you will have to practice obedience? I can tell you a lot of times. And we usually say that this obedience has to be mutual. But I'm afraid to say that sometimes it's not. And also, like in the monastic life, we practice obedience. And we can talk about obedience. But what other things? Love, for example, that we were talking about before. Genuine love. And when we talk about love, most of the times we refer to the married life. But if you ask yourselves, you think that nowadays married couples understand the meaning behind the word love? Do they understand about sacrificial love? Do they understand about the love that forgives everything? Do they understand about love that it's regulated by forbearance, for example, by accepting the other person's sometimes will and ideas, by just humbling yourself all the time? All these things that we said they are aspects of love. And in a monastery, I was reading again at Abbot Ieronymos some of the writings, and it was saying monastics, they have a lot of love. Love is a gift from God, and it's a gift from God that is even given to the monastic life. But when we are talking about love, what do we mean? When I say that I love someone, what do I mean in practice, in the real life? I am trying to make the other person happy. I am trying to stop living for myself and start living for the other. This is what love means. This is what love is all about. Now, when we are talking about the merit of the monastic life, I will just give you only one thing, again, like the last thing: freedom. And I'm sure that probably it has passed through your minds that when you will get married eventually, you will lose your freedom. And I'm sure also for the ones that they have thought about monastic life, that they thought at some point in their lives that by becoming a monastic, you also lose your freedom. I can tell you about that. This unconditional love, and this genuine love, and this sacrificial love that we are talking about cannot thrive in an environment that does not have freedom. Love cannot be forced.
You are finished with thought.
No. Maybe you can interrupt me, because otherwise we'll be here by midnight.
I was just thinking, where's the balance, or how can both freedom and obedience coexist? Either in a relationship or in a monastery? Because one would think obedience would rule out freedom, as in like obedience, absolute obedience to your partner or your elder would mean that whatever they do, whatever they say, you do.
Yes.
So how can we be free?
Yes. Obviously, we also have to know our measure. And when we are talking about obedience in the married life, it's not exactly the same with the obedience that we have to practice in a monastery. In marriage, obviously, although sometimes it is, I'm afraid to say, because the circumstances are such. But at the end of the day, obedience, as many people think, is not slavery. That is why the true monastic spirit encourages the novice or the monastic to say what they have inside them. And the fathers of the church, the contemporary elders, would say that you cannot practice true obedience unless you are given the opportunity to open up and share with your elder or your spiritual father what is this that you're going through and what are your limits. For example, Elder Ieronymos says, diakonimata, the tasks that we are doing in the monastery, this is how we call them, diakonimata. Why do we call them diakonimata? Because the word diakonima comes from the Greek verb diakono, which means I serve. So when we do our tasks in the monastery, we do these tasks because we want to serve our brothers. And this is how also the household chores, they have to be looked at when you are married. Otherwise, one of the two, they will always revolt against each other and say, I'm doing more things than what you're doing. So when we choose the Equanimata, Elder Emiliano says, the abbot has to ask the novice or the monastic, what is this that they would like to do? They might have certain gifts, they might have learned a few things, a trade or something when they were in the world. And then he says that you're a novice or a monastic, you have to open up and say to your elder, what is this that you would like to do and serve in the monastery? Okay? But he says afterwards, a true freedom means that you are ready to accept something which is opposite from what you want to do. I don't know if you understand this. Like, we cannot be completely free if we always do what we want. This is the freedom that our today's society presents to us. We become free, or we want to become free, to do whatever we want. But if you think about it, this is not freedom, it's slavery to your own will. And if you disagree, please go back to certain moments in your lives and remember what these reactions you had inside you every time that someone close to you, your friend, your father, your mother, your grandparents, asked you to do something that you didn't like. Was it easy? Oh, I can tell you it wasn't. I also went through this, and I can tell you that because I'm a human, sometimes I'm also going through this. There are times that inside me I react. So the fact that we are reacting inside us every time we are told to do something we don't want to, it means that in a way we are enslaved into all these things that they regulate our ideas, our ego, and our will. So, true obedience sets you free, but in a very unique and special way. And definitely not in the way that our society is presenting to us, the way that we can achieve freedom.
I have a question.
Yes.
What if you said that monasticism might not be for everyone, like choosing to be married to Christ, but what are ways, like, if we keep falling into sin in this, like, not being married to Christ, like, if we keep making mistakes, how can we still stay close to God? Like, is there a way to still be as close as monastics are to Christ if we haven't chosen monasticism?
That's a very good question. First of all, I have to say that I'm not 100% sure if what sometimes as clergy we say to people, and I have done this in the past, that if you go and you do something which is not appropriate, that you keep God away from you. I'm not sure about this, to be honest. Actually, I would disagree with this. But with me saying that, I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not now asking you to go and do whatever you like, and it's going to be okay. Okay? But I would say that sin, because you just mentioned the word sin, in Greek, if you were to translate it, is amartia, as we say. And we have to be very, very careful whenever we use the word amartia, because sometimes we can name everything amartia, okay? And then, especially young people like you, they come and say to us, come on, this is an amartia. The other thing is an amartia, and the other thing is an amartia. Then what is this that we can do, and what is this that we cannot do? And obviously I'm not relating to things that we all know that they are amartias. Okay? I'm relating to other things, simple things that sometimes, like you're asked to do while, you're living your life and, and you are finding yourselves. Okay? Like, for example, so I have to be specific on this. Like, for example, there are people that they say, is it an hamartia to have friends? Obviously, it's not an hamartia to have friends. Is it an hamartia to go out? What are you going to do? You're going to stay at home all the time. If you want to, you can do that, okay? But even if you go out, you have to know about that you shouldn't go and do silly things, inappropriate things. But if you're going to just enjoy yourself with your friends and spend some quality time, this is not an hamartia. Or sometimes, even just, like finding someone and start going out with this person. Obviously, we know that we have to put parameters and limits, but if you don't do that, how are you going to find the person that you're going to meet and get married? Are you going to find this person from home and the other person from home? How are you going to meet with each other? Okay? So, but when we're talking about obviously hamartias, just to get back to your question, we're talking about things that we shouldn't do. But God is always there. The same way the father was waiting for the prodigal son. The father knew what his son was going and doing while he was away. He understood why he asked for his inheritance. And probably he thought, and he realized that he would come back without having anything and having done whatever he had done. But the father was always there. Wait. It was the son that distanced himself from God. Okay? So I would say that when we fall, it's just that we allow ourselves to lose focus. This is what hamartia means. I lose the target. And for us, what is our target? What is our purpose? We said this at the beginning. Before going to reaching the crossroads and trying to understand which path we should follow, our purpose is to become God's by grace. Our purpose is to be saved, to become saints if we can. And so, every time we fall, we lose focus. But God has given us repentance. And repentance and the sacrament of confession is one of the greatest gifts that God could ever give to us. So every time we fall, we have the opportunity to rise up again. And you don't even have to make 2 or 3 steps to find God. God says to you, everything that you've done, they have been forgiven, they have been wiped out from the blackboard, and you make a new start. That's why when they asked one of the great elders, desert fathers, which I cannot remember now the name, I think it was Arsenius the Great, but I'm not sure. And they asked him, how long do we have to repent? That's a very good question. How long do we have to repent for something we have done in order to reinstate ourselves to our previous state before falling in front of God? And they asked him, and they said, for example, a month, with intense prayer and fasting and vigils and everything. And he said, no, that's too much. The desert fathers, which we know how strict they were with themselves, but not with the others. They were always encouraging the others. And then they said to him, for example, a week. And he said, no, I think it's too much again. And then they said 3 days. It's again too much. He said, I believe. And he says to them afterwards, I believe that if someone wants and his heart is desiring this, he can be reinstated back to the state, the spiritual state he had before falling, from the morning till the evening. But this can happen if we find our target, if we find our focus. And salvation can be achieved in the world. Like, salvation can be achieved by people who are married. We have in our church examples of many people who were married and they became saints. Yes. That's why I said before. And there's a very good question what you asked, because sometimes people think that I have two paths. I have to choose the monastic life because this is something higher, because I want to be very high in front of God and do the right thing. But if we are not careful, that's why I said before, we have to know our measure. If we are not careful, we might put the target or the level too high for us. God does not say that monastic life is the only way for you to be saved. But God says to the person who went and asked him a few Sundays ago when we read the Gospel, he said to him, "What is this that I should do in order to inherit eternal life?" An eternal question for all of us. And Jesus said to him, "You know what you're supposed to do. We all know what we are supposed to do. Just follow whatever the law says. Love your neighbor, love God, and with all your heart, and with all your mind, and with all your strength." You see, Jesus did not say to him, "Go and sell everything and come and follow me." But then this young person and the fathers of the church talk about this and say, although this young person was suffering from the sickness or the disease of parsimony, he liked the money he had and the riches. That's why he was not able to just put them behind. He was looking for something more. That's why he went and he asked Jesus, what is it that he has to do? Not many people did that. The Gospel does not mention too many people doing that. And Jesus, because he saw through his heart that he had potential, he said to him, if you're looking for something deeper and something more, go and sell everything. Why? So that you make the poor rich. The poor will always be poor. There will always be people that they are poor. Even if we go and sell everything we have, still there will be poor people around us. Unfortunately, no one is happy with this, but this is how our society is and was and will be. Because this is the human nature. But said, not because you have to go and give these things to the poor people, which actually you're going to benefit them anyway. Go and sell everything so that you are deprived from everything that is keeping you on earth. If you want something deeper and bigger, you have to become light, free. And then what is this that you have to do so that you don't lose focus and you don't lose your way? Come and follow me. Yes. But this is not for everyone. And this does not mean that if someone cannot do that he won't or she will not be saved.
Does anyone want to ask Elder Ieronymos anything now related to that topic?
Do you think that it's important to acquire the traits of monastic people, even if you don't choose that pathway, to use it in your everyday life, like all the traits that they have?
Yes, this is another very good question. I knew that the people that come here, they learn a lot of things, but now I will tell other young people that if you go there, all of a sudden you're just asking good questions. It's the spirit, the vibe.
I think you're bored tomorrow.
Yes, that's why I said before that monastic virtues are not the virtues only for the monastics, are the virtues that every Christian person has to follow. And sometimes you might have someone, a male or a female, that inside them they're looking for something more, but they are not 100% sure yet which path to follow. And they choose to go and at least try out the monastic life, which there's nothing wrong with this. And they choose and stay. It used to happen a lot on Mount Athos as well. They choose and stay at a specific monastery. They follow the monastic life and they learn. What is it that they learn? They learn, as I said before, how to be obedient, how to pray, how just, not to allow their pride or the ego to overtake them, to practice genuine love and understand that what's important is to keep the peace. Something that we sometimes ask ourselves, are you peaceful? Yeah, I'm very peaceful at the moment. Are we peaceful? And if you're peaceful, then at the first instance that something happens with your brother or your sister, why is it that you find yourself exhibiting a behavior which is not what you want? Or if you're peaceful, why is it that you cannot even, stand for 15 minutes waiting for your doctor's appointment? And if you're peaceful, why is it that when you go and you have your MRI exam, that you have to be there on these thin noises all the time for half an hour? You cannot just do it because you want to have your phone in front of you all the time and check what your friends are doing in Facebook. And now you're going to tell me peaceful and social media. What does this have to do? Well, the person who is peaceful and has peace inside him, he can also live in silence. He can take a few moments and just, reassess himself, to find God, to find where he stands. And says, Baba, I'm waiting here for half an hour. I'm going to use this so that I can find out where I'm standing, what am I doing in my life. Yes. So we learn a lot of things in the monastery. And afterwards, some people, they might just understand after a while that it's not for them. But this does not mean that whatever they have learned, they cannot put all these things into practice, and that they are not going to become handy in their life. Yes, so, yes, monastic virtues are not only for the people that they are in a monastery, definitely. Yes.
Is there anyone else got a question? More questions? How long did I go monastic life? My class.
It's another good question. Sometimes we know and sometimes it takes time for us to find out. It depends on the person. In Greece they say that «Ή μικρός παντρέψου, ή μικρός καλογερέψου». Does anyone know what this means? You either it is better if you become a monastic young, or you get married young. Something like this. Yes, but it is not the same for everyone. Okay, so some people, they just know. And when they go and they visit a monastery, for example, they just know that this is the place for them. This is the life that they want to follow. It happens sometimes. You just know inside you. But other people also, they have to spend some time in the world, like finding themselves, so that they are able to understand which path is for them. On this path, there are a few things that they play a huge role in the process of finding which path is for you. Before but going to this, I just have to tell you something that I have realized from myself. And I have seen this in other people as well, whether they became monastics or they did not become monastics. Please don't listen to the stereotypes that a lot of people have or believe about monasticism or married life. Because there are stereotypes that they are there from our grandparents or our forefathers, and they still follow us. That's why, for example, if people hear that a young person who has studied and has a couple of PhDs and a few degrees decides to go and become a monastic, which is the case on Mount Athos. Apparently, on Mount Athos, the rate of education per capita is the highest in Greece. Yes, and they say, why do you have to go to the monastery? Just the monastery, it's only for the people that they have no education. They have nowhere to go. They lack social skills. They do believe this. Although Elder Ieronymos says that monastics are probably the most social people in the world. But then again, what does social mean anyway? Just talking from the morning till night without knowing what you're saying. Being social means that, you're on the social media for 24/7. Is this what social means? But this is not social, because actually you understand that the people that they expose themselves too much on the media, on the social media, afterwards, when they meet with someone, they don't know how to communicate. And so there are a lot of stereotypes. Another stereotype is, we're talking about monasticism now. Another stereotype is that if you have a person who is energetic, full of life, enthusiastic, exciting to be around, that this person should not become a monastic. Unfortunately, I'm afraid to say that sometimes even us as spiritual fathers, we direct people in this way. You know why? Because we are humans as well and we make mistakes. But we also sometimes we follow these stereotypes. And someone who is energetic and modern, if you can say that, or they have, like a fancy haircut or some tattoos. I'm not encouraging you to do all these things. I'm talking now about someone who has already has this. Okay? And they go, and this person might go to the church, and all the people are like this. Oh, makria, away from us. Is this Christian life? Are we talking about Christian virtues? Excluding people from the way they look, from how they look? But there are these stereotypes. I'm sure that you have gone through this. I have gone through similar situations for different reasons, obviously. So, no. Everyone is called to become a monastic if they put themselves into this and if they think that they can make themselves useful in front of God. It's what we said before for our calling. God wants you to do whatever you feel comfortable with doing. God wants you to do whatever you're at peace with doing. That's why there is a story that we always repeat, but it's a very nice story. When a young person went to St. Paisios and asked him, waiting for a prophecy, for a prophetic word from Elder Paisios, from St. Paisios, and asked him, Yeroda, what do you think, I should get married or I should become a monastic? And St. Paisios, although he could give him an answer and tell him, no, for you I think you have to become a married person. Obviously, for the reasons that St. Paisius knew, that's why he did not give him an answer. And other times he would give other people answers. He said to him, put aside for the moment the will of God. Because this person asked, what is the will of God for me, to become a monk or get married? And he said to him, put aside the will of God and ask yourself. And if you are not ready yet, find out. Pray about it. Go and stay in a monastery and experience the monastic life. Or, like what I would say today to you all, participate in the fellowships, in the youth activities, like in the church services. Our church here, our local church is full of activities. It's so nice. To be honest, I have to say that with myself growing up in a very small place in Greece, actually I could say I'm jealous of all these activities. And I said to myself, I wish I had the opportunities that you have to be involved in all these good initiatives that they are happening for the youth and they are offered to the youth. So, and St. Paisius said, what is this that you want to do? And you're at peace with doing. Ask yourself. And whatever is this that you're at peace with doing, this is what God's will is for you. Meaning, God will never ask you to do something that you're not able to do or that it's too much for you to do. It's us sometimes, and I repeat myself, because sometimes we have these issues, all of us, that sometimes we cannot understand who we are. We cannot understand our weaknesses and our strengths. That's why it is important to have self-knowledge through the help of our spiritual father and other people, of our friends. Have self-knowledge and understand and say, I know that monastic life is something which is unique and important and very high up. But if I look inside me, I think I will not be able to make it. That's totally okay. Yes. Or you might be one of these people that the only thing that you can think of is how to be in a monastery, in your monastic cell, away from the world, away from the cares that the world is coming with. This is the truth. And just go out to your garden, to the monastic garden, follow your diaconima, your task, go to the church service, and afterwards go back to your room and say to yourself, thank God I have nothing to worry about. Thank God. I think that I am a king, that I live in paradise, because monastic life is a life in paradise. Monastics, they resemble Adam and Eve before the original sin, as we said.
Who else has a question for Ieronymos? No one else is wondering if there are any thoughts or comments?
Thank you, Elisa. You were talking about peace. If someone's tried to find peace, to say go to a spiritual father, praying, reading the Bible, but they still don't feel peace, what would your advice be for that person? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yes, of course. Another good question. What you're describing, it's something that I think it's a current issue of the people of our generation. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if we look back, our forefathers, our grandparents, even our parents, they had to go through, unfortunately, some very terrible and difficult situations. And they were able, most of the times, to maintain their peace. not to become anxious, to keep going, and just wake up every day in the morning and continue with their daily tasks, knowing that at that specific moment in their lives or stage in their lives, they were going through something that they had no solution at that moment. I remember, I have to share this, it's a very short story. Because we are talking about peace, and allow me to also introduce into this anxiety. I think they are connected sometimes. As I said before, my grandfather was a chanter. And when I was little, I would just be there next to him. He used to teach me how to chant small tropare from the Divine Liturgy. I still remember this. I have very fond memories of my grandparents. And my grandfather used to work in the opposite city, Kavala, which was a big city. And he used to go and chant to, like one of the big churches that the bishop, the metropolitan, sometimes would go and preside in the services. So one day he said to me, there was a big Divine Liturgy service, an important service. The metropolitan was present, and the chanters asked my grandfather to say the Apostle, the epistle reading. And I said to him, I can imagine how much anxiety you had and how stressed you were. And he said to me, no, why should I be anxious? Like I just went and I said the Apostle the way I knew. So, a few things on this. On Mount Athos they used to say that if we go for confession and we are given certain directions, I'm not saying that this is for everyone, but sometimes it can be, without even knowing it. After the confession, if we inside us we find that we don't have peace, sometimes this might mean that we have too much of a strong will and we don't want to accept what our spiritual father has suggested. And this can wreck your peace. Why is this? Because you keep thinking, you believe in your thoughts, and then you become anxious. And thoughts, too many thoughts, can make you lose your peace. Obviously, spiritual fathers or elders should not insist, but sometimes the people that they confess and they receive some advice, it's just they don't want to accept this advice. And afterwards, because they don't want to accept this advice, and yet they don't have any advice, they put themselves in a situation that they lose their peace and their anxiety continues because in front of them they have the unknown. Some other times, but not being able to find your peace straight away is because we have taught ourselves to act or behave or think in a certain way. And it is very hard sometimes to go against our second nature, which is the way we think, the way we perceive things around us, and also, again, the things that we want to do, and we know that we shouldn't, and yet we react, although we know that we should do it. Okay? And the other thing is that, and this is another thing that I wanted to share with you tonight, and it's interesting how actually it came to my mind with this question. Sometimes we don't have peace because we think in a complicated way. We are not simple enough. Or sometimes we lack peace because we are consumed by the process of always trying to find the best, the perfect. There can never be something which is perfect for us, because we are not perfect. I don't know if this makes sense, but I see this a lot in young people nowadays. You have to be careful with this. We have, in Australia, we are very blessed. We have so many opportunities. Okay? But where does this end? This quest of always doing something better. It's the same, for example, with someone who wants to become a monastic, goes to a monastery, finds an elder that this elder talks to his heart. He understands that he has to be at this monastery because God actually is so kind that gives us understanding. We just make a small step and God does the rest, if this is for us. And then this person, because he is anxious if what he is doing is the best thing for him, he says, yes, but how about if there is a more spiritual monastery than the one that I have been through, and an elder that is holier and more spiritual than the one that now, surprisingly and gratefully, is talking to your heart. And then your thoughts, they are so strong that they are taking away from you the opportunity you have to settle down somewhere and be happy. And then you continue with the quest of finding what's the best for you, which, as you can realize, for some people, and this is very unfortunate, never ends if you think in this way. And it's the same when you're trying to find the right person for you, if you want to get married. And now tell me, you get engaged and you get married. Afterwards, if the first week after your honeymoon, you go back home and everything is starting, and that you have to put yourself into this. The thought comes to you with the first morning that you have to wake up and prepare breakfast for your husband who is waking up 5 o'clock, and you have to be there and support him. And vice versa. Okay, this is not old-fashioned. This is common sense. This is love. This is genuine love. This is sacrificial love. Don't listen to the messages of nowadays, of today's society, that they say, go and do whatever you want and just make sure you're happy. This is not happiness. Okay? And then the first week that you find things hard for you, and you say to yourself, is this what married life is all about? Because I had a totally different image on my head. The thought comes and says to you, but how do I know that the person that I just got married with is the right one? There will always be someone who is better than the person that you got married with. But you think that if you follow such thoughts that your marriage is going to last? I don't think so. So, going back to what we said, I think we have to simplify our lives. There was a monastic on Mount Athos, whose name I think was Modestus. This is a true story. He was a very simple person. He would never judge anyone, and he never thought that he was somebody. or that he was doing anything good, which is how we are supposed to be. And one day, they were having a divine liturgy, and he was sitting on one of his pews. Towards the holy altar. Going there, talking to someone next to the proskynitari, the temple with the icons, and going back. And then they asked him, but what were you doing there? Like monastics, monks? Only if they have only if there is a reason that they should move, which is also the case with all of us when we are in the church, regardless what we are doing. And then he says to them afterwards, but didn't you see the bishop who was there? And they said, what bishop? Like, we didn't have a bishop today in our divine liturgy. And now this was before. He asked him, did you see the bishop? And so what happened was, this simple person, who was a very simple person, and was not expecting anything for himself. He was just happy and content with what he had. He said to himself, this is where I'm going to stay for the rest of my life. Regardless if the fathers that are next to me, they are the best or the worst, God will bless me if I'm under obedience and if I follow my pace. And we have to be careful sometimes, because our thoughts can go against our pace. So sometimes we might be peaceful and we don't even realize it because we are too occupied with our thoughts. And then he goes to this person who was Christ himself. And Christ says to him, come and have a look. And he opens a book in front of him. And he says, what is this name? Whose name is this? Can you see the name? And Father Modestus says, yes, I can see it. It says, Modestus Monachos. Monk Modestus. Who was himself. You know what this meant? And this father actually passed away soon after. Christ was showing to him his name, which was already written in the book of life. So we have to be careful not to consume ourselves with too many thoughts and too many ideas and too many options. Because I'm telling you, life is too short, and if we don't settle down, if we think that it is the time to settle down, and just, follow what we have decided to follow, and follow what it's there for us to follow, and we find peace with this, then we'll always be in the quest of doing more things and more things and more things without finding peace.
I got one final question before we run out. It's a short question. Do you have to be able to grow big? I know it sounds silly, but I'm curious.
Well, so that I don't disappoint you, that's a very good question. Look, but this is a very practical question. To be honest, I have to confess publicly that when I was thinking of becoming a monk, I would always ask, my parents and my brother, you think I'm going to have a beard? I was nervous. if I was going to have a beard or not. Even before that. No, obviously not. Like whatever you can do. Like if you can't grow your beard, you can't. It's just that where do we grow? Why do we grow our beard? It's because we don't want to have any, we do this so that we are not occupied by any cares for ourselves. So every day we have to go and trim our beard or shave or do things, and that's why there is a tropario that επιμελείστε ψυχής πράγματος αθανάτου. Which tropario is this one? For the martyrs or for the saints? For what? No, for the ascetics. It's a tropario that sometimes if a saint does not have a very specific tropario, that we use it and we just add the name of the...
It's a chant, is it?
Yes, a chanting hymn, yes. The main chanting hymn that is referring to the saint of the day. Tropario, Apolitikio, yes. And it says that in you, and see Mitero Pater, is this the one, Father? Pater Acre. In you, the creation according to the image of God was preserved. The hymns of our church are amazing. Yes. And you took up on your shoulders the cross of Christ and you continued. But what is this that you managed to do in your life? The tropario says that the only thing that you took care of was your soul, because it is something that is immortal. So if we do take care of our bodies just to be presentable, I'm sure that this is okay. Okay? This is where the discussion of sin goes. There are people also that might come and say, but is it a sin, just, to make myself, beautiful and, presentable? Obviously not. But it's whether you are attached too much onto this, or whether you spend 15 minutes or 2 hours. Because I think there are people that do it, unfortunately. Yes. So we have to look after our soul, which is immortal, and with the rest, whether we have a beard or not, because there were instances, for example, in the church history, that there were monks that they could not grow a beard. And they still became monastics, but because God is so kind and Panagia is so kind, and she's such a kind mother, she even replied to the prayers of the monastics that they were praying for a beard. We know that, you know that there were stories in the church that the monastics prayed and afterwards they grew a long beard. Actually, there was one in a monastic on Mount Athos that we have a photo that you can see that the beard is touching the ground. Yes, yes. But this is also part of what we are wearing. Like you can see that, like we are wearing something which is all the time the same. Something that it has to do with the cutting off of our will. The dark color, that it is reminding us that, we, not to be unhappy, but to understand that, that we also have to, understand who we are, that there's still a lot of way for us, to go so that we reach our salvation. And yes, the external things, they're not that important, but we just have to be careful not to pay attention too much on the external appearance, because then we miss the point. Yes.
If there's nothing else, we'd to say, we'll wrap that up.
Yes. Can I just say quickly, maybe a few points of discussions for the next topic that I suggested, for next year. So, what is this that we have to do to discover our calling? And to find out whether monasticism or married life is for us or not. Elder Ieronymos says that the only time that Adam and Eve lost contact and lost the ability that they had to communicate continuously with God was when they allowed the serpent to start putting thoughts in their minds. So, when we are trying to find our way, we have to remain steadfast and focused on God. Okay. We have to have a prayer room, like say a few prayers, invoke God's grace and assistance in what we are trying to do. Ask for advice from our spiritual father. If we want to find out whether we can become monastics or not, how can we do that? If we try and empty ourselves, but at the beginning we have to empty our minds. Just practice this, and you will see it's very important. It's something that once you have, you don't want to lose it. It's what Elder Ieronymos says. You feel like going and selling everything and buying this. What is this? The peace in your heart. Even if you can just get 5 minutes every day, so you stop thinking. I'm telling you, we are overthinking nowadays. Just give yourself some time and just stay there in a corner in front of your icons and say, this moment is dedicated to God. I will stop thinking of anything else so that God can help me think of the appropriate things that I have to think. We have to work for this, but we shouldn't remain like without doing anything. Sometimes it's good to be occupied. You can't just say, should I become a monk or not? Up until I decide, I will just stay at home and allow my parents, to provide for me. No, if you're not 100% sure, go and find something to do. If you haven't found yet the right person for you to get married, develop yourself spiritually, in the world. Continue with your career path. Just don't give up. Just don't go and stay on your bed for the whole day, waiting, for God's intervention. Because God, will help you only also if you are able, to move your legs and your hands as well. And the last thing, and I choose now, looking at my notes, to finish with, and I will choose to finish with this, something that it's not irrelevant, but I suppose something different of what I am representing to you tonight, okay? But even this, with me saying that, what are we representing tonight that we are all here today, gathered? We are representing where we should be and how we can make ourselves useful in front of God, regardless if we become married or we become monastics. So I will just end with this. I will end with just a few hints about what marriage is all about. Okay. So, and Elder Ieronymos of Simonopetra, again, he asks, why is it that God created Eve? Why is it that God created a woman? to be a companion to Adam. And he says, the creation of Eve was something which was sacred, equally sacred with the creation of Adam. And the fact that God created Eve did not pose any ethical or immoral issue. Now we are talking about the state of Adam and Eve before the fall. There wasn't any problem, like a bodily problem, like any problem that posed any ethical issues. Marriage is a bridge from earth to heaven. And that's why it is something which is sacred, blessed by the Church. And it is something that if it is utilized in the right and proper way, can lead both husband and wife to paradise.
It's a beautiful content. Thanks for coming and I guess because the topic is unique, it provides a very unique discussion, but also yourself, you've experienced quite a lot from the average youth like yours, and it was very interesting to hear your thoughts. Just get around the applause, please.
Can I just add one last thing? I suppose because I'm a monastic, at least I'm trying to be a monastic, I just have an advice, a piece of advice for all of you. Up until you find your way, continue exploring. Okay. Obviously, with the path that has to do with the sacramental marriage, as I said before, there are limits and borders, as you know, that we should be careful of when we meet someone. Ethical issues, not because of the marriage itself, but because we are humans, and we are humans of a fallen state, okay? And also explore the opportunity that is given to you, even about the monastic life. Go and visit a monastery, regardless if you are to become a monastic or not, regardless if you are young or old. Like, give yourselves the opportunity to discover if what you're experiencing is for you or not. And the reason why I'm saying that is because our life is too short, but we have to make it extraordinary. Not in a secular way, but in a spiritual way. We have to make the most out of it, and believe me, there are many people that we meet and we get to know and that we confess that if they have and if they had the right spiritual direction and spiritual environment, I can tell you they could have easily become monastics.